You're looking at the face of Tito Mboweni, the Minister of Finance in South Africa. The question is, will he have a big cigar for that budget statement that's going to be making shortly in Parliament? We cross over live now to Cape Town, where, as you can see, the Minister is at the hot seat. There is that famous book, and he starts now.
His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Cabinet colleagues, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the 10th Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, honorable members, members of the executive committees responsible for finance, fellow South Africans. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I brought that plant with me. Yeah. It is my singular honor and privilege to introduce the first budget of the 6th administration. Today I table the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, the 2020 Budget Review, the 2020 Estimates of National Expenditure, and the 2020 Tax Proposals. Now, the aloe-ferox survives and thrives when times are tough. It actually prefers less water. The previous one we had, we actually gave it too much water, and it didn't work. It needs less water. It wins even when it seems the odds are against it. Mr. President, in your State of the Nation address 2 weeks ago, you reminded us that our capacity to win is not diminished. We have it within ourselves to be the best in the world. Congratulations to Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunzi. Congratulations to the Springboks and the Proteas, who won whilst we were preparing this budget speech. Our economy has won before, and it will win again. Before democracy, our growth was pedestrian. Indeed, between 1990 and 1992, the economy contracted for 3 consecutive years. In the 15 years following democracy, economic growth averaged 3.6% a year. The gross debt to GDP ratio declined from 46% to 26%. In the 5 years from 2003 to 2008, growth averaged around 5%, and South Africa was amongst the fastest growing major economies in the world. The unemployment rate improved by 5%. Now, even after a decade of weak economic performance, South Africa still boasts deep and liquid capital markets, strong institutions, the most diversified economy on the continent of Africa, and a young population. We are part of the most vibrant continent in this world. As Pliny the Elder said, ex Africa semper aliquid novi, always something new from Africa. Winning requires hard work, focus, time, patience, and resilience. Achieving economic growth and high employment levels requires a plan. To quote 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win, unquote. Amen. What are the conditions under which we must implement our plan to win? In 2020, global economic growth is expected to strengthen to 3.3%. Global inflation remains contained, global monetary policy is supportive, and we are benefiting from demand for emerging market assets. Asia, excluding Japan, is expected to grow by 5.8% in 2020. The virus which has plagued China is a source of uncertainty as it spreads around the world. With growth of 3.5%, Sub-Saharan Africa is forecast to be the second fastest growing region in the world. Against this backdrop, we forecast that the South African economy will grow by 0.9% and inflation will average 4.5% in 2020. Over the next 18 months, the economy should get a number of jump starts. These include, amongst others, firstly, the fruits of the structural reform agenda led by the President. Second, lower inflation. Third, the interest rate reductions earlier this year. Fourth, the recent gains in platinum group metals prices. 5, the impending change to the electricity regulatory framework. And 6, the tax proposals we are setting out today. Persistent electricity problems will, however, hold back growth. Over the next 3 years, we expect growth to average just over 1%. Therefore, a stable supply of electricity will be our #1 critical task. Last year, the government embraced the ideas contained in the document towards an economic strategy for South Africa. This is our guiding plan. It contains the basic and fundamental pillars of our approach: strengthening the macroeconomic framework to deliver certainty, transparency and lower borrowing costs, focusing spending on education, health, and social development, modernizing network industries and restructuring our state-owned enterprises, opening markets to trade with the rest of the continent, implementing the reimagined industrial strategy. Minister Patel, I thought you'd clap, man. Lowering the cost of doing business, focusing on job-creating sectors such as agriculture and tourism. Goodbye. Underpinning all of this is the need for an efficient and capable state. We must also leverage the private sector as far as possible. Today we report on our progress. We are moving forward. A sound macroeconomic framework always lays the foundation for growth. Budgets are complex, but the numbers are quite simple. The numbers show that we have a lot of work to do. For 2020-21, revenue is projected to be 1.58 trillion rand, or 29.2% of GDP. Expenditure is projected at 1.95 trillion rand, or 36% of GDP. This means a consolidated budget deficit of 370.5 billion rand, or 6.8% of GDP in 2020-2021. Gross national debt is projected to be 3.56 trillion rand, or 65.6% of GDP by the end of 2020-21. To support growth, therefore, we propose no major tax increases. I don't know where people who talked about VAT increase got that from. Indeed, there is some real personal income relief. This budget means that a teacher who earns on average 460,000 rand a year will see their taxes reduced by nearly 3,400 rand a year. Hard-working tax-paying South Africans who earn on average 265,000 rand a year will see their income tax reduced by over 1,500 a year. Our income tax system is progressive, and the adjustments reflect this. Someone, for example, earning 10,000 rand a month will pay 10% less in tax. Someone earning 100,000 rand a month will pay about 1.5% less. We're also proposing broadening the corporate income tax base. This additional revenue will be used to reduce the corporate tax rate in the near future to help our businesses to grow. Startups will ignite the economy. The tax system supports this in a number of ways, including a preferential small business tax regime, the VAT registration threshold, and the turnover tax. We'll review this to improve their effectiveness, whilst at the same time reducing the scope for fraud and abuse. Sometimes we're afraid to take bold measures because we say there will be abuse and fraud. But in actual fact, if we want to grab the animal by the scruff of its neck, we must be bold and take chances sometimes to win and not to fail. To support the property market, the threshold for transfer duties is hereby adjusted. Property costing 1 million rand or less will no longer be subject to transfer duties. I see you're about to buy that, yes. There will be a renewed focus on illicit and criminal activity, including non-compliance by some religious public benefit organizations. Religious bodies must operate within the strict boundaries of the law if they are to enjoy any tax-exempt status. The annual tax-free savings account contributions limit rises to 36,000 rand. We have increased excise duties to keep pace with inflation. From today, a 340 milliliter can of beer or cider will cost only an extra 8 cents. Only. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine will cost only an extra 14 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of sparkling wine, Minister Mbalula, will only cost an extra 61 cents. A bottle of 750 milliliter spirits, including whiskey, gin, or vodka, will rise by 2.89 rand. A packet of 20 cigarettes a packet of 20 cigarettes, irrespective of the nice smile the Deputy President is giving me, will be an extra 74 cents. A 25 gram of piped tobacco, with due respect to some retired people, will cost 40 cents more. A 23-gram cigar will cost an extra 6.73 rand. I'm happy again to report to this House that there is no increase in the price of sorghum beer. In line with the Department of Health policy, we'll start taxing heated tobacco products. For example, Hubbly, Bubbly. The rate will be set at 75% of the rate of cigarettes. Electronic cigarettes, or so-called vapes, will be taxed from 2021. To adjust for inflation, the fuel levy goes up by 25 cents per litre, of which 16 cents is for the general fuel levy and 9 cents is for the road accident fund. Despite this increase, the liabilities of the road accident fund are forecast to exceed 600 billion rand by 2022-23. We need to take urgent steps to reduce this risk to the fiscus and bring about a more equitable way of sharing these costs. One option is to introduce compulsory third-party insurance, and we should debate this as quickly as possible. The carbon tax and other measures will help green the economy, and will bring in 1.75 billion rand over the next few months. This will be complemented by more focused spending on climate change mitigation. We remain extremely concerned about plastic bags throughout the length and breadth of our country. In this regard, we've increased the plastic bag levy to 25 cents. Madam Speaker, our measures will support growth, but fiscal sustainability must be uppermost in our mind. Our aloe ferox can withstand the long dry season because it is unsentimental. Let me repeat this. Our aloe ferox plant can withstand the long dry season because it is unsentimental. It shares dead weight in order to direct increasingly scarce resources to what is young and vital. Total consolidated government spending is expected to grow at an average annual rate of 5.1%, from 1.9 trillion rand in 2020-21 to 2.14 trillion rand in 2022-23. This is mainly due to mounting debt service costs. Non-interest spending declines on average over the medium-term expenditure framework in real terms. As a major step towards fiscal sustainability, today we announce a net downward adjustment to main budget non-interest expenditure of 156.1 billion rand over the next 3 years, relative to the 2019 budget projections. The total reduction is mainly the result of lowering program baselines and the wage bill by 261 billion rand. These are partially offset by additions and relocations of 111 billion rand. Of this, more than half of 60 billion rand is for Eskom and South African Airways. Let me unpack the 261 billion in baseline spending reductions. The first part is adjustment on program spending of about 100 billion rand. Some of these were announced in the medium-term budget policy statement. Adjustments are mainly in conditional grants for provinces and municipalities. For human settlements, adjustments amount to 14.6 billion rand over the MTF. There are also adjustments of 2.8 billion to the municipal infrastructure grants. Over the 3 years, public transport spending is adjusted by 13.2 billion, mainly on allocations to the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa and the Public Transport Network grant. The planning and implementation of the integrated public transport networks will consequently be suspended in Buffalo City, Mbombela, and Msunduzi municipalities. Education infrastructure allocations are adjusted by 5.2 billion rand over the medium term, while health is adjusted by 3.9 billion over the same period. With some of these savings, while some of these savings are good for the fiscus, in many cases, we're also making difficult and painful political sacrifices. It is therefore important that we direct our constrained resources to areas that have a high social impact and have the largest economic multipliers. We shall undertake spending reviews to ensure that we achieve these objectives. The second part is adjustments on the wage bill by about 160 billion rand over the medium term. Public servants do crucial work for our country, often unappreciated, in difficult conditions. The governing party is a firm believer in the critical role of the state in development. For this reason, we need qualified, motivated, and effective staff members. Working with the public sector unions, we have over the past 15 years sought to improve the lot of public servants. And we have committed significant resources for compensating them every year, even as we have tried to increase their numbers in recognition of their demanding workloads. Between 2006 and 7 and 2011 and 12, we were able to add about 190,000 employees to the public service. However, at the same time, the government wages also increased quite significantly. To balance the books, which is the job of the Minister of Finance, to balance the books, we slowed hiring, and since 2011, 2012, the number of government employees has actually declined. Madam Speaker, we cannot go on like this. Classroom sizes are growing, hospitals are getting fuller, and our communities are becoming increasingly unsafe. Once we get the wage growth under control, we get corruption under control, we get wasteful expenditure under control, we will focus on what we need to focus on: hiring in important areas such as education, the police, and healthcare. We can hire strategically and better match skill and opportunity. The employer has tabled an agenda item on the management of the Public Service Wage Bill at the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. The focus is to discuss and negotiate the containment of costs in the final phase of implementation of the current wage agreement. We aim to save 37.8 billion rand in the next financial year. There's more than one way in which this goal can be achieved. Organized labor understands where we are and share the pains of this government. They have made constructive proposals on a range of issues which need to be discussed and negotiated. We must be open to negotiations and discussions. Mr. President, you have directed that your government should deal with wasteful expenditure. This is a vital step in restoring the confidence of the public in the government. We must get more value for our money. The President's instruction requires a dynamic and an appropriate mix of quantity, quality, capacity, and capability in the administration of the state. We are moving forward with reforms to the procurement system with a focus on value for money and maximizing the quality and quantity of services. Cabinet has approved the publication of a new procurement bill for public comment. We will accelerate merging and consolidating public entities. We'll propose a new law to stop excessive salaries in public entities. We must also deal decisively with the excessively high cost of leasing government buildings. We are already acting on fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Last year, this House amended the Public Audit Act to empower the Auditor General to, 1, refer matters to a public body for investigation and prosecution, 2, take binding remedial actions, 3, recover money directly from the responsible culprits. To show the determination of the executive to deal with runaway costs, we'll implement a number of steps. This includes, 1, abolishing the current wasteful subsistence and travel system. 2, replacing the exorbitant transversal cell phone contracts. 3, requiring economy class travel for all domestic flights, except in exceptional circumstances of health or otherwise. So Minister Pando, Mr. President, has been very helpful through this process, and she wrote me a very nice contribution to this section. And she's providing phenomenal leadership in building a better Africa and a better world. Her work is unlocking massive value for money from South Africa's overseas missions by, amongst others, closing and merging some missions, downgrading the level of representation, reducing the number of officials who are posted to these missions, and will be establishing a fully fledged diplomatic academy. Now, the twin of our fiscal framework is an appropriate monetary policy framework. Regular consultation on fiscal and monetary policy is critical to the sustainability of our fiscal accounts, to the balanced growth of the economy, and to protecting the welfare of our people. We'd like to reiterate the current inflation target band of 6 to 3% stays as the most appropriate monetary policy framework for a country like ours. In line with that target, the moderate inflation outcomes for 2019 of 4.1% and the forecast for inflation to be around 4.5% over the next few years has helped to lower the cost of capital to firms, households, and the public sector. The South African Reserve Bank will continue to undertake its duties in line with Section 224 of the Constitution, which is to perform its functions independently without fear, favor, or prejudice in the interest of balanced and sustainable growth of the Republic of South Africa. Now, Madam Speaker, for our alloferox to grow to its full potential, we need to do things that will help it in the medium to long term. For example, augmenting the soil with the right amount of organic manure, providing the right amount of sun and the correct amount of water. For a fast-growing economy, we need to make sure that our children are well educated, all our children, black and white. Our people are healthy, and our money is invested properly. Consequently, the largest spending areas will be learning and culture, which receives 396 billion rand, followed by health, 230 billion rand, and social development, 310 billion rand. In the education sector, investment goes to new schools, replacing old schools which were constructed with inappropriate material, that means mud schools, and providing them with water, electricity, and sanitation. In 2020-21, the Maths, Science, and Technology grant will introduce coding and robotics to learners in grades R to 3, as announced by the President. Transfers to provinces support schooling for 13 million children and healthcare for 49.1 million South Africans. It is in this context that taking forward the consultations on the national health insurance is very, very important. The President has been elected chairperson of the African Union for this year. We need to support his work and prove that South Africa is fully behind the African Union agenda. There is a decision of the African Union to establish a Pan-African University, and that the Space Sciences Institute will be located at a South African university. We therefore can announce today that this Space Sciences Institute will be located at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and that funding will be made available immediately and the consultations process will take place with the relevant ministers. Dr. Nzimande. The Department of Higher Education and Training will reallocate existing funds to undertake a feasibility study for the establishment of a new University of Science and Innovation in Ekurhuleni, as announced by the President. Over the next 3 years, 48.2% of nationally raised funds are allocated to national government, 43% to provincial government, and 8.8% to local government. 500 million rand has been provisionally set aside for disaster management to respond to the impact of recent floods and the ongoing drought. Honorable members, Funani Kwivilu from Limpopo told us that, I quote, infrastructure development should be a priority for the government, and we agree. In fact, capital spending is the fastest growing component of non-interest spending. The spending is complemented by the infrastructure fund. Over the next 3 years, the Development Bank of Southern Africa will package blended finance mega projects of at least 200 billion rand. Government has committed 10 billion rand over the next 3 years in this regard. The public can now find information on infrastructure projects on the portal Vuleka Mali, the internet portal. When you go into it, you click into it, what is happening, and you get information directly from that portal. 8.2 million young people between the ages of 15 and 34 are not in education, not in employment or training. Government is committed to helping them. Raising skills and improving the matching of young people and jobs is an important focus of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. To date, the Jobs Fund projects have created approximately 175,000 permanent jobs and helped 21,000 people into internships and created 59,900 short-term jobs in South Africa. In South Africa. Of these, 65% went to the youth. As the President announced, we will reprioritize resources to raise spending on this critical issue. We will start work immediately, Mr. President, and I will provide more details in the 2020 medium-term budget statement. We intend to make this intervention a resounding success, for we cannot fail our youth. We are a caring society. We are a caring government. More than 18 million South Africans receive a grant of one sort or another, which is a lifeline for many. Grants reduce inequality and protect the most vulnerable in our society. I'm happy to announce that grants are adjusted as follows. Firstly, 80 rand increase for old age, disability and care dependency, which goes up to 1,860 per month. 80 rand increase in the War Veterans Grant to 1,880 rand. 40 rand increase for the Foster Care Grant to 1,040 rand per month. The Child Support Grant will increase by 20 rand to 445 per month. Changing the way we provide social grants will generate many savings in our economy and budget, which will be partly used to raise the daily subsidy per child. Madam Speaker, the next component of our plan is to modernize network industries and restructure state-owned enterprises. Government will, in quotes, do whatever it takes, unquote, to ensure a stable electricity supply. As I said, it is our #1 task. We have allocated 230 billion rand over the next 10 years to achieve the restructuring of the electricity sector. The current electricity shortfall will ease as Eskom completes critical maintenance work that they're doing. Bid window 4 of the renewable energy program is being accelerated. The rapid decline in renewable energy prices will give a new impetus momentum to bid window 5. Determinations to implement the integrated resource plan of 2019 are finished and await the concurrence of the National Energy Regulator. It will shortly be possible for municipalities in financially good standing positions to purchase electricity from independent power producers. Mr. President, the South African Airways sword of Damocles has fallen on us. SAA has been placed under business rescue, which will lead to a radically restructured airline. Over the medium term, government has allocated 16.4 billion rand to settle guaranteed debt and interest. The associated restructuring costs will be reprioritized within the budget. It is the very sincere hope of many that this intervention will lead to a sustainable airline that is not a burden to the fiscus. Cabinet approved the economic regulation of transport bill in November, which takes us forward to a fairer process for third-party access into the rail network. In 2019, South Africa signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which comes into force on the 1st of July 2020. This agreement will open up new markets, promote regional integration, and contribute to economic growth. Today, we announce complementary measures to make it easier to do cross-border financial transactions, which will support trade and investment. We want to encourage South Africans abroad to keep their ties with their home country. We will raise the exempt amount for foreign remuneration to 1.25 million rand. We will phase out the administratively burdensome and cumbersome process of emigration through the South African Reserve Bank. Yes, yeah, that's a good idea. Why didn't I think about that? We intend to implement the reimagined industrial strategy. An innovation fund will be capitalized with 1.2 billion rand over the next 3 years. Industrial business incentives worth 18.5 billion rand will create and retain approximately 57,000 jobs. An additional 107 million rand is reprioritized for the refurbishment of the 27 industrial parks we've spoken about before in townships and rural economies. 6.4 billion rand is allocated for small business incentive programs, of which 2.2 billion will be transferred to the Small Enterprise Development Agency. Together with the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, we are considering various proposals from ITEC related to scrap metal and chicken, poultry. Madam Speaker, steps are being taken to address South Africa's lagging productivity growth and reduce the cost of doing business. For example, the BEES portal will provide a streamlined way to register a new business with the CIPC, SARS, UIF, and the Competition Fund in one day. And that's happening already. The Competition Amendment Act came into force in July 2019, strengthening the Competition Commission's powers. The Commission has conducted inquiries into a number of sectors to strengthen competition. South Africa is moving on with the fourth industrial revolution. We are determined not to be left behind. We are relaxing regulations to help our flourishing fintech sector. The Spectrum licensing plan was released in November last year, preparing the way for auctioning high-demand spectrum. ICASA will be appropriately capacitated for this purpose. A voucher system will be introduced to allow households to acquire digital devices. Over the medium term, we'll support agriculture and tourism. Government has allocated 495.1 million rand to the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to improve compliance with biosecurity and the support for exports. Oh, you didn't get that. It means to avoid animal diseases. It's biosecurity. An additional 500 million rand is reprioritized over the medium term for the department to finalize land claims. To support tourism, we'll engage with the tourism industry on how we can formalize the tourism levy, not tax, Minister, the tourism levy. Madam Speaker, fighting corruption is a priority of this administration, and there is no doubt about that. The NPA, the Special Investigating Unit, and the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation are allocated an additional 2.4 billion rand in this budget. This will enable the appointment of approximately 800 investigators and 277 prosecutors who will assist with, amongst others, the clearing of the backlogs of cases such as those emanating from the Zondo Commission. The disruptive actions of those, listen carefully, the disruptive actions of those who storm construction sites or mines harm growth and lead to job losses. Communities should expose such people to allow Minister Kele and Minister Lamula to ensure that the law takes its course. I hope all South Africans will join us in condemning this act of banditry. Working with the financial sector, a pilot of the Help to Buy scheme has supported over 2,000 families to buy their own homes. For every one subsidy provided by government, the scheme crowds in 8 rand from the private sector. In a single year, the Help to Buy scheme was supported by nearly 1 billion rand in new lending. Last year, this House passed legislation which allows state-owned enterprises to apply for banking licenses. In July 2019, I tasked the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. Masondo, with the responsibility to undertake the work towards the creation of a state bank. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to inform the House that we now have preferred options for the establishment of a state bank, and we are ready to move now. The architecture will be that of a retail bank operating on commercial principles. The state bank will be subject to the Banks Act and will have an appropriate capital structure and performance parameters on investments and loan impairments. It will be regulated by the Prudential Authority on its own merits. We will also consolidate the currently fragmented system of national, provincial, and local finance institutions. Mr. President, a sovereign wealth fund is an important long-term tool for saving and investment for future generations. It can also contribute to strengthening the the fiscal framework. We must learn to save during the good times. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund can play an important role as a counter-cyclical fiscal tool. Today, we announced the formation of the South African Sovereign Wealth Fund with a capital injection of 30 billion rand, which easily converts to about $2 billion US. Given the legal, administrative, and procedural issues involved, a relevant bill will be submitted before this House during the course of this Parliament. There are a variety of possible funding sources for this, such as proceeds from the spectrum allocation, petroleum, gas, and minerals rights royalties, the sale of non-core state assets, future fiscal surpluses, and money set aside for this purpose. This will ensure that we continue to invest in future generations in a fiscally prudent manner. The National Development Plan calls for a capable and efficient state that creates the right environment for the private sector to flourish. Taxpayers deserve to feel that their money is going to a government that's efficient and capable. We thank all South Africans who continue paying for their taxes. SARS is an integral part of the capable state. We are focused on re-establishing the institutional integrity and fighting criminality. Just this past week, 2 individuals were convicted for up to 168 years imprisonment for tax fraud. For all South Africans, the state is their local municipality. Allocations to government, to local government. Oh, Chief. Yeah. Allocation to local government help municipalities provide basic services and are a powerful redistribution tool. Mr. President, the National Treasury asks members of the public to provide tips to guide our thinking as we shaped this budget. Today, we're joined by Ms. Akona Mwele from Gauteng, who advised us, I quote, support greater local economic development in municipalities, unquote. And we agree with her. I'm therefore pleased to announce that local government is allocated 426 billion rand from nationally raised funds over the MTF. The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and I have agreed that our officials will find a way to use the allocations through the municipal infrastructure grant to ensure that municipalities not only build infrastructure, but also maintain the infrastructure they already have. What this means is that instead of saying a municipality has not spent a particular allocation and therefore we take it back, we should ensure at national level that expenditure does take place, investment does take place, because unfortunately the people don't move to national. They stay in the locality and they deserve the services that they need. Now, the President spoke about the need for smart cities. So, as part of preparing this submission, Mr. President, we took a basic look around and said, where are these smart cities going to be? So it turns out that the OR Tambo International Airport, Aerotropolis in Ekurhuleni, is actually at an advanced stage of implementation. It's at an advanced stage of implementation. And King Shaka Airport in eThekwini is progressing well in that direction. The Cape Town shall soon join them in this regard. Meanwhile, Lanseria has been identified as a potential smart city. So we are proceeding in this regard. We must support this Aerotropolis, plural. Provinces Healthcare and education are at the front line of service delivery. I wish to thank my colleagues in the provinces, the MECs for finance, for the work they're doing and the inputs they make on a regular basis, and for sharing the difficulties with us as we go along. And I must really fully appreciate the contribution of Team Finance in this regard. Madam Speaker, there are a number of entities that report to the Ministry of Finance. The report of the Commission of Inquiry into the PIC highlights, amongst others, important lessons for us, including the need to implement and adhere to governance and financial controls and to reduce risk, particularly the risk appetite. The House has passed legislation to strengthen the independent regulatory board for auditors, and further legislation is planned. We'll shortly appoint an independent panel of experts to review the practices and traditions of the auditing profession, because the profession has let us down. The country's money laundering system is currently undergoing a peer review, which will help strengthen the fight against illegitimate and illegal flows. The South African Reserve Bank will in future play a more integral part in this fight. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority has repositioned itself as a market conduct regulator and will shortly appoint a new commissioner. The National Treasury will take steps to strengthen the budget process. And since it's now agreed that the budget process should ideally start after the first Lekgotla in June to provide the political leadership, is very important in this step. So winning is not easy, Madam Speaker, Mr. President. Less than 2 years before winning the World Cup, the Springboks were trounced 57-0 by the All Blacks. Miss Universe, our Miss Universe, did not win her first attempt at Miss South Africa. Winning takes patience, prudence, perseverance, and focus. As St. Paul tells us, we must run in such a way that we may win. To paraphrase Charles Dickens, who I quoted in my first address to this House, we will make this the best of times. Mr. President, Deputy President, thank you for your leadership. A word of appreciation to the Deputy Minister of Finance, the National Treasurer General of Finance and his team. My thanks to the SARS Commissioner, to the 10th Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, because I'm the 8th Governor, to colleagues in Cabinet and the Ministers' Committee on the Budget. I really thank you very much. My gratitude goes as well to the parliamentary committees who worked tirelessly to process the legislation accompanying the speech. I close by reflecting on the words of Advocate Bram Fisher, who said from the dock, and I quote, "With confidence, we lay our case before the whole world. Whether we win or we die, freedom will rise in Africa like the sun from the morning clouds." I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister.
It's fair to say that Tito Mboweni has just received a standing ovation from one side of the House after delivering that budget. I think in terms of what it all means, I think a quick check of the rand is warranted. Let's take a look at that rand dollar price. If you remember, before we went out, we were sitting at 15.25 to the dollar. There we are at the moment. We have gained what, 11, 12 cents to the dollar since the minister began speaking and laying out his plans for the next fiscal year. What do those plans mean? Well, just a quick take of the numbers. I think one of the things that has stood out for most people is what we spoke about before we took the minister. And that was what was required to try to bring spending under control. And we said there needed to be some blood. There needed to be a fight. Well, the minister appears to have declared a fight with the unions. We discuss the impact after this break.